Hey everybody, I'm Dane Sanders. I want to welcome you to Fast Track Coaching. This is, I think, we're in the high 160s episode right now. We've been doing this for over 3 years. And if you're unfamiliar with the show, it's basically a conversation with me and some folks I have high esteem for. And we're having virtual coffee. This is coffee, not beer. It's early in the morning. Hanging out and talking a little bit about creativity and business and how you might be able to move both forward just a little bit this week. The purpose is not to change the whole world, but hopefully it will inspire, give you a little bit of gumption, moxie to go do something new that you haven't done in a while. And today's guest is someone I'm really excited to have on. John Keatley, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. John, I found your work kind of rolling around the internet and found some amazing depictions that were pretty unexpected. And I think the first image I saw of yours was Tim Gunn, the amazing Make It Work guy from all the reality TV shows. And when I first saw it, it was surreal to me because I thought there's no way that's real. Like there's no way that you got him to do that kind of work. And that led to a whole bunch of other images that I saw. And if you're at home and you're watching, you might want to go straight away to keatleyphoto.com, Keatley photo.com. And as we're talking and we reference different works, you'll see right on this main site what these are, and I think it'll be beneficial for you. But without wasting any time, I want to jump right in. How the heck do you get those people to do those kinds of images? And we'll talk about a bunch of them, but I want to start there.
Well, I think it depends again on the image and what it is that you're trying to get someone to do. You're not always going to get everybody to do every idea that you have. I've had several shoots where we had these grand ideas and it didn't end up working out exactly how I had expected. But I think always just being ready for anything, because you're dealing with people, and people are people. They're unexpected things will happen, and no matter how much you communicate about something. So that being said, especially if we're talking about editorial work, it's a lot more unpredictable than advertising, which is going to be a lot more scripted and planned out, and everyone's usually on board. But I think really being excited about an idea and trying to convey that excitement, and being able to convince the people that you're working with of your intentions or your ideas, and being able to clearly communicate those and kind of bring them along is something that's important, especially if you want to try to start working in kind of quirky or unexpected or unusual type portraits like I often do.
Awesome. Well, it's funny. I'm getting ahead of myself because honestly, I'm just excited to be on the call with you. I get, you're a very humble guy. You're very understated. And even in our pre-call in advance of this, I was just struck by your accessibility. But in that, I probably need to back up just for a second because I do have a number of things I want to cover today. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with John, share a little bit about your journey into photography. Because as I was doing my homework on you, it seemed like you were largely self-taught and an enthusiast who just made good on a vision in your head. Talk a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I was in college when I picked up a camera. I took a high school photography class like I think most people did, but I didn't really think much of it. I remember enjoying it. It was a fun, I enjoyed the creative aspect of it, but it was a class that you had to take, so I wasn't totally in it. In college, I picked up my grandpa's old film camera simply because I didn't have any pictures of my friends in my life, and I just wanted to have an account of my college years. And so I didn't take that many rolls or shoot that many rolls of film, but I think the last roll that I took to get developed, and it was the last roll because my parents had a talk with me and said I couldn't be spending any more money on film because I had to pay for college. And so the last roll I took in to get developed, the lab manager came out and spoke with me, and she said, she looked through my pictures with me and asked if I'd ever considered being a photographer before. And I honestly had no idea what that even meant. In the small town where I grew up, there was a photographer, and I think he was also the reporter and the editor, of the newspaper. And it just never crossed my mind that would be something you could make a living at, let alone, anyway, it was just a foreign concept to me. And so But despite that, I decided right then and there that that's what I was going to do. So I went home and I broadcast to my family that I was going to be a photographer. And my daughter says hi in the background. So that was kind of it. I was still in school, and I continued on with classes, but I pretty much poured all of my spare time into photography. There weren't really a lot of resources online back then.
When would this have been? Like circa when?
This was 2001, I believe.
Okay.
And
you were in Seattle at this whole time?
Yeah, I was in Seattle. I was at SPU.
Okay.
And this is a couple people on the whole campus who I think even owned, cameras. And so I just connected with anyone that had any sort of connection or ideas about photography. And I ended up getting a job shooting for my university. And some people there introduced me to a couple of photographers that they hired who were, one was local, one was out of LA. And one of the staff photographers for the Seattle Times, who's since passed away, his name was Jimmy Lott. He mentored me for a couple of years and really gave me some great advice. And he was someone who he didn't sugarcoat anything. He was brutal, for lack of a better term. But it was good because I think it like really refined me, and he didn't give me any illusions about what I needed to do. And so I just kind of dove in, and that was that. But yeah, largely self-taught, even up until this point. So.
Well, there's a lot in what you're saying that's really striking to me. One is that you had a mentor who was a journalist, and in my limited experience, journalists can be have some of the harder edges in our industry, and sometimes cynically so. But not universally, but that's often the case. And I'm with you. Like, I appreciate they carry the weight of the world sometimes on their shoulders of what they're about. But yet, in our conversations, you don't strike me as having that kind of. You didn't get bit by the cynical bug. You seem like you don't seem very grumpy. But what do you think about that? We're just new friends, so.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think that it's easy in this industry to be cynical or upset. I mean, you're basically pouring yourself into what you do, and you care more than anyone else does about your work. And
that's right. It's
definitely the kind of job where there's victories and there's defeats. Sometimes I think the defeats can be more frequent than the victories. But if you could shoot something. I mean, I've had it all happen. I mean, you'll shoot something you're like thrilled about, and then the photo editor says, didn't you shoot more? Is this all you shot? And it could be like, one of your favorite images, and they wanted to see more. Or, you could do a really great job and everyone's thrilled, and you'll never hear from anyone, about it. They'll just be like, okay, good, we got this picture. And so it can come across as a thankless job in a lot of ways.
That's fair.
And again, I don't say that to be bitter. I mean, I think even people who you think, oh, they didn't thank me. I mean, it's not that they don't appreciate you. It's such a just stressful, cutthroat kind of industry that they're busy, and like photo editors sometimes when they finish the job, like they're on to the next one already.
Sure.
So you can't take things personally. I've learned, which was tough in the beginning because I'm an emotional person, which I think probably a lot of creative people are, and so
you take it personally.
It's hard to find that balance. But I think also for me, I'm very persistent, and I think sometimes in the past I've maybe taken that what I perceive to be negativity or frustration, and it's just fueled me even more. So if I sense that someone's saying you can't do something or you didn't do something right or whatever, it just kind of pushes me even more. And again, that's not even necessarily where that feedback comes from sometimes, but that's sometimes where I channel it. And so I think ultimately you have to get to a point where you are creating something that you're proud of and that you care about and that you love and that what it means to you, and then it's easier to not worry so much about what other people say or don't say. But it goes on and on. I mean, it's the kind of thing where especially in down economy, I know some people like
that's right.
They might have 3-4 weeks between jobs, and it's easy to start thinking like, oh, nobody likes my work, or I'm not doing very good, or whatever. But again, that's not the case. It's just when you're in your head that much and you have limited information to work with, it can be difficult. But anyway, to answer your question, I mean, I love what I do, as I'm sure most people would say in this position, and yeah, I feel really fortunate. And I guess it's the kind of thing where I have the mentality that you can't just wait around for what you want to happen. You just have to make it happen. And so I feel like in the last few years, I've been able to kind of identify what that is and go after it. And so even when, work might be slow, I'm constantly working or busy with at least projects that I want to be doing that are fulfilling. So I think that definitely helps to avoid some of that, jadedness.
Well, there's a number of things in what you're saying that I'm hearing, at least. One is that you're looking for, a resourceful approach to an industry that doesn't give a lot of handouts. You have to work really hard to put yourself in a constructive position. And it sounds like on some level, both for yourself and it sounds even prescriptive a little bit. Like if folks are listening in, gosh, it might be resourceful to not spend a whole lot of energy around making up stuff in your head about what those you're trying to serve are doing or thinking or not doing. There's only so much you can do, and what can you control and take action with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the same goes with any job. I mean,
that's right.
People who are persistent and motivated and, kind of goal-oriented, I mean, those are the people that are going to get after it and make things happen. And so there's really no room for feeling sorry for yourself or getting frustrated. And the people I work with will tell you, I mean, I get frustrated. There's days where, I just can't believe what just happened. But I think it's fine to vent and discuss that, but then you have to be done and move on. You can't hold on to that. So it's healthy to be upset or, get frustrated. Those are definitely real and healthy feelings. But I think the difference is you can't hold on to them. And sometimes you'll run across people who have held on to those things
for a long time.
It doesn't do you any good. So
yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about not just the cool big time paying gigs. I'm actually curious a little bit about the space in between your great jobs. And before we're done today, I will, because I know folks at home are going to we're going to talk a little bit about some of your more iconic images. But in between these great shoots, it seems like you have a consistent habit of doing a number of things. Number one, it seems like you have a lot of personal projects that are running all the time. And it seems like those personal projects set the table for other opportunities that might work commercially. But earlier in our conversation, you made the distinction between editorial work and advertising work, where advertising is usually there's a lot more voices in the process. A lot of things are decided in advance of the shoot. Really, you're just executing on the day, as opposed to doing a ton of creativity on the day. I guess the creativity would be in advance of the shoot. Is when you're in that editorial work or personal work, or you're wanting to take a risk with the Tim Gunns of the world, or even some of the other stuff you've done in Liberia and these other personal projects, how important are those in between projects in advance of the big ones?
I mean, I think personal work is extremely important. I think that it's important to be creating and to keep your mind in that place where you're creating, whether it's for someone else or for yourself. I think sometimes when I do a personal project, it's more just for that self-satisfaction and desire that I have to create something. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's more of an agenda to it, or a goal, like this project is going to help me present better in this area or that area. But I found even the times where I don't have a goal or a specific plan for a personal project, so many times when I get a job, the presentation that the client gives me is like the majority of the work that they're showing me they're responding to is personal work. Even if sometimes I feel like, wow, how did you get from there to there? It sometimes doesn't even seem to connect. But I think... can
you give an example?
Of a specific job, or... Well,
it's funny. I had a conversation once with a friend of mine named Jeremy Cowart. You probably know Jeremy and his work, and he talked in a very common language around what you're describing, where he would find himself in a conversation with like E! Entertainment or something, and he thought he blew the interview or the conversation, and the last minute he throws some job he did in an NGO effort, and they go crazy about, wow, you got that image with limited resources. You'd work great with Paris Hilton, and they made this big jump to that kind of thing. Is that what you're describing, where people make a kind of leap, and I just want to make sure I get my mind around what you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean that's kind of it. I mean, sometimes it's funny. Sometimes people make a leap in the wrong direction. I mean, there's been times where I didn't get a job because I wasn't quirky enough or something, you know.
Interesting.
And you think like, wow, I thought I was kind of quirky. But so sometimes people overanalyze things in one way, but then yeah, I mean, like you're saying, I just actually had a meeting where there's a very corporate client, and it's this kind of large series of portraits, and there's one group portrait, and they pulled this personal image that I did several years ago of a bunch of like really grungy guys in this like old warehouse. They were supposed, it's like a joke. It's supposed to be like an underground arm wrestling ring.
I saw that image. I love it.
And I think
the illegal arm wrestling ring
is still on my website. But they pulled that and they said they really like that. And we're talking about photographing like 12 CEOs, you know, in a boardroom. And I just thought, wow, I mean, it's a group of people, and they said they wanted that kind of quirkiness. And so, yeah, sometimes it's funny how people can make the leap because someone else would have said, well, you know, clearly you don't shoot businessmen because this picture or whatever. And so, but I mean, to answer your question, yeah, I've had people show me a lot of times my holiday family pictures that I've been doing the last few years. They'll show those and say that that's really what they're responding to for some project. And I mean, sometimes it seems like more of a jump than other times, but it seems like people really end up responding to the work that I've created and produced on my own, and the ideas that I've come up with that aren't tied to something else. So,
well, okay, so let's talk about that for a second, because you're, and again, if you have a chance, if you're at home watching this, be sure to jump on John's site and take a peek at. Right now, we're going to talk about his family pictures. I'm thinking about the one on the side of the road with the Sasquatch or Bigfoot, depending on what part of the world you're in. And then this year's, I think it was this year, you guys are up in a tree and you have the beard. And this idea, especially with editorial photographers, it strikes me as consistently so, that it's about the vision. And when people hire someone like you, what they're hiring is not just the technical execution, although that's part of it, I expect, but a big chunk of it is, you got this idea to put your baby child in the arms of Bigfoot, and to be kind of, you know, whatever, you know, kind of giving this nonchalant look back, and your wife's so cute, and that people can go, oh my gosh, if he can create that, what else could he create over here? And the other part that I'm struck by in it is, it seems like when you're photographing things that you like to shoot, like out of your own creation, and you get paid to do it in another context, it just seems like that would be the kind of work that you'd want to flourish in. That's what you want to promote and put on your site and have out there for folks. What I guess two things. One, how important is vision in your mind? And then two, how the heck do you come up with these ideas?
Well, I mean, I think vision is, you know, very important. I think consistency is important to have in your vision as well. That's not to say you can't.
When you say, tell me more about consistency. What do you mean when you say that?
I think as an artist and as a brand, because, you know, we are essentially all our own brand. Yeah. It's important to be consistent and to be understood by your target audience. You know, for example, I sometimes I'll use the example of like Coke. If Coke started selling under the same brand office furniture, how comfortable would you be in their product, you know? Right. On either end, you know, the soft drink or the office furniture. I mean, it's very confusing. Like, what is this brand all of a sudden? What are they trying to do? Why are they changing? Why aren't they comfortable sticking with what they're good at, kind of thing? And so I think it's important to be able to show consistently that you're passionate about something and that you're committed and good at that thing. Rather than being all over the board. And also, especially when you get into, I mean, I think it's true for all types of photography, but especially when you get into advertising, client wants to see and they want to know that you've done what they want to hire you for like a million times. They want to know that you can do it with your eyes closed. And you can translate that into any industry. I mean, if you needed to get your car fixed, if your car broke down, you wouldn't go calling like refrigerator repair shops, you know, and being like, oh man, this guy's really talented. I bet he could take those talents and translate it into this other completely different thing. And it's the same thing for like weddings, for example. I mean, people don't go trolling for auto photographers to see, oh, this guy's really talented. I bet he could do a great wedding. Like, they want to know, this guy has done exactly what I want to hire. He showed consistency in that, and he can do a great job for us. And so I think that's why I say consistency, because I think it's important to show that repetition, but also being able to vary your vision and your creative ideas within that consistency. And so and that's tricky. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's certainly easier to do when you decide to work in the area that you actually are passionate about, because then you're not going to really have to try that hard, because it just comes naturally.
Right.
So,
well, it's funny as you're saying that. The other word that comes to mind a ton is continuity, and to have continuity of thread, but also an expansive vision, or like that you can get all this done as a foundation and go even further. But you're going further in a particular direction. But that strikes me as really contrasting. At least, so I'm in portrait and weddings, and a different, slightly different kind of portrait. And I'm struck by how that isn't consistent in my genre. How photographers broadcast, hey, I do kind of the weddings, parties, anything approach of, I'll basically do whatever you pay me for, and I get why. I mean, I think that there's on some level a degree of like, look, I got to feed the kids. I have a lot of compassion for the perspective. Right. But if I'm hearing you right, you're saying, yeah, that's the motivation's understandable, but it's just not very effective. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm not going to tell someone that you can't do several things, but you need to understand how they fit in with your brand. Maybe you need two different brands, to do whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, it's different for everyone. I'm not going to lay down like a blanket rule, but I think the other side of that too is, for me, I mean, I used to do several different types of photography, and I came to a point where I realized I had a desire to try to be great at something, and I knew that if I was doing several things, I would maybe be good at several things, but I would never be great at one thing. And so that's when I decided to just completely focus on what I'm doing now, because it requires so much attention to be really great at something. It requires so much focus and so many hours that if you're not committed to doing that one thing, you'll never really achieve it. So there's several ways you could look at that, but I mean, I think, some people could say, well, I need to do all these different things to pay the bills, and that's true maybe in the current situation, but that's not really like thinking long term, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you continue with that mindset, you'll always just be getting by doing those things. Running a business it's risky. I mean, if people are looking for something safe, they probably shouldn't be doing photography, I would say. So if you're going to take that jump, you might as well go all the way and try to really make it happen at what you want to do, rather than saying, it's like deciding that you're going to buy a Porsche or some fancy car, and then, getting half the money saved up, and then just like getting a junker that like doesn't really work, and you still ended up spending more money on that somewhat fancy car than if you got a brand new, like, economy class car. It just doesn't make sense. Like, if you're going to do it, do it. I guess that's my whole. That's a bad analogy, but
well, no, I'm with you, because I guess what I'm really struck by is, and I'm sure you get emails like this all the time. Photographers saying, "Okay, what should I do next?" And at the end of this call, I'm going to say, "What should you do in the first 90 days and 190 days and 2 years of your business if you're just starting out?" But ultimately, what I'm hearing you say is there's real tension between, look, this is not for the faint of heart. It's not. It's never been more challenging, more competitive ever, and yet it's still remarkably accessible. Most people can get in the game easier than ever. And at the same time, what you're saying is so super risky, but if you're gonna play a risky game, play the risky game. Like play it to win it.
Yeah.
And that I think is a reflection of reality, not just a prescription or advice. It just is the way, and I suspect that there's a lot of wisdom in there for folks who are listening in, and I just feel compassion for myself on days when I don't want to take the risk, when it feels scary, and I'm terrified to jump in with both feet, but realizing that when I dip my toe or kind of try to ease my way in, there are folks who are hungry enough and willing to take a risk, who are going all in, and they're going to get the benefit for it.
Right. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of your work, because whatever you've done some fun things to put yourself in a great position. A couple things that I'm struck by is the Waterbeards project that you did.
Yeah.
Was that a personal project? What was that?
I mean, it kind of feels like personal work, but it was a project for a friend of mine owns a water bottle company who I'll give him a little promotion right now.
Who is it?
It's called Mir.
Okay.
MIIR.
Okay.
It's actually a really great company. It sounds like I'm giving a commercial, but every bottle they sell, they provide.
I'm asking you to. It's no commercial. Just tell me all about it.
Every bottle they sell, they provide clean drinking water by building clean water wells in developing countries. And
was this part of the work where you were in the Philippines recently?
No, it's different, but I think the reason I went maybe had something to do with the work that I did with Mir as well. But it was a year ago, last January, I went to Liberia with Mir, and I photographed the building of the first 2 clean water wells that they funded. And then that's where I also shot kind of like basically a personal series of portraits of children when I was over there. And from that trip and from kind of working with Mir and my friend Brian, we've been talking a lot about his brand and about business, and we were doing a film shoot one day, and he was joking around about I don't know if you've experienced this, but there's a lot of wide mouth water bottles in the industry. A lot of water bottles are it's a simple product, but they're designed pretty poorly. And we were just joking around about,
like you're talking about like the Nalgene big.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes you just spill all over yourself. Like the hole is like the size of your face, and so you're trying, especially if you're like in a car or something, you're trying to drink and it gets all over you. So he was kind of joking around about the term waterbeard, and as soon as I heard him say that, I instantly had this image in my head of people with water beards, like taking it literally. And so I pitched it to him. I pitched the idea to him, and he was really excited about it and told me to run with it. So it was kind of like basically self-produced commercial work, but then they ended up using it, so I got the benefit of having these print ads. But a lot of my work sometimes kind of toes that line between personal work and even if I'm collaborating with a brand on some sort of campaign.
Got it. I get it. Okay, that's cool. So MIIR. Hey folks, check it out. That's actually pretty clever, and I love the messaging. It's way to differentiate. I think it's really cool. The other ones that I'm struck by is, getting access to folks like Sarah Palin or Annie Leibovitz, or, and I feel this is embarrassing that I don't have his name on the tip of my tongue, because I always think of him as the president on 24.
Dennis Haysbert, yeah.
Yeah. With Dennis Haysbert. Those and so many more. I mean, Kelly Carrender of all people. People who start the Tea Party, and it's just so many, and or even like Seattle folks like Mark Driscoll, and the football player at UW that you're friends with, Jake Locker. How do you get access to these people when they're rolling through a market like Seattle? It struck me. Is it just your representation, or are you working the channels?
I mean, it's a mix of both. It depends on the season and who I'm working with at the time. A lot of that work came from when I was working with Seattle Met, which is a local magazine here in Seattle. For a while, they had a celebrity column or piece that they did every month, and so through that, I was able to get a lot of access to celebrities for stories that they hired me to do, or portraits they hired me to take for their stories. And then I think really, if you want the whole story of it, I think the first celebrity I got was through Seattle Met, and I basically just tried to leverage that.
And that was no small one. I mean, that was Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins. No, it wasn't small, but at the same time, I think a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people go, yeah, well, it was just that one, or it wasn't even that great of a picture, or whatever. And it's like, if you have that mindset, it's not going to get you anywhere. And so I basically took that picture and just kind of presented it like, yeah, I just did this. And even if it means like calling yourself a celebrity photographer. I mean, there might be people that go, well, you're not, you just took one or whatever, but you kind of have to own it. You have to name it and claim it. So that was just pretty much my mindset. I tried to leveraged that on my website and just through my communication with people. And then I got another shoot, and I just, every time I got a new project like that, I tried to maximize, my marketing out of that, and then eventually out of the whole body as it grew. But yeah, a lot of it is just maintaining relationships with people who have access, who are working with these people, and then eventually it gets to the point where it just kind of becomes known if someone wants to do a celebrity, and then it becomes not just a celebrity in Seattle, but if someone wants my particular look, even if they're outside of Seattle, then you start getting considered for that kind of stuff. And so that was one of the first big ones for me, was the Sarah Palin shoot, which I think was largely based on the celebrity work I had done locally, but the publisher liked how I approached celebrities and how they were stylized, but at the same time, like, they were still approachable and somewhat accessible, and
very humanizing. I mean, I think that's the irony of the quirky images that you do. My feedback is just they seem they're voluntarily getting off a pedestal, participating with really remarkable image, and then whatever we do as fans, we can put them back on their pedestal if we want. But for some reason, for me, in a Twitter land world, those images are really timely. They just seem very like it feels proximity just adjusts with your images.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, the other one we have to talk about is, of course, Annie Leibovitz, because here, this iconic photographer of our day, who is in herself a celebrity, but also a celebrity photographer. And now you're a celebrity photographer shooting I have a friend who writes. He's also from Seattle, a guy named Jeff Jensen, who writes for Entertainment Weekly magazine, and he writes comic books and does all these cool things. And he's a big fan of horror. And he got to go out and interview Stephen King and J.J. Abrams. And the three of them went to a horror movie together, and it was like this gorgeous moment of transcendence where it all came together.
Yeah.
On some level, that's what this sounds like for you, was having a chance to interact with her and as a professional, but also to take her picture. Talk a little bit about that event.
I was photographing John Waters, who he wrote Hairspray.
Yeah.
And somebody was there, I think, doing some PR for him, and it was a really great shoot. It went really well. We had a lot of fun, and he even stuck around after and just kind of joked and chatted with us, which doesn't often happen. And somehow it came up that one of the people working PR with him was also working with Annie Leibovitz on her upcoming book tour, which was her book At Work.
Yeah.
And this similar situation has actually happened to me several times. It's amazing how it's worked, but I just kind of blurted out loud. I said, I would love to photograph her. And everyone just kind of chuckled and said, well, wouldn't that be something? And the woman said, well, I don't think she actually was really letting anyone photograph her these days. We haven't had sitting for her in quite some time. And anyway, that was that. And then several months later, I got an email, and they said, do you want to photograph Annie Leibovitz? I guess remembering me from that conversation and from the photo shoot with John. And I said, of course, yeah, I would love to. And
did you? Now you're a human being. Did you kind of freak out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was ecstatic, but at the same time, to be honest, I don't remember this particular instance. I certainly get excited and my heart jumps when these kinds of things come up, but you also have to kind of maintain a little bit, because it doesn't mean that you are going to get it either.
Sure.
If I got the chance to photograph everyone I've talked to somebody about potentially photographing, it would be unbelievable. But
sure,
that's just kind of how it goes. So I was excited, needless to say. And then a few days later, I got an email that said that, and I'm still unclear if it was Annie or just her people or who, but they said that she needed to review my portfolio before she'd agree to it. And then a couple of days later, I got an email back and said that she agreed to work with me. And so that was obviously an incredibly exciting opportunity. I actually had about a month before the shoot when I found out, and so somehow I was able to just kind of put it out of my mind for a little bit, and I didn't start thinking about it until pretty close into the day, just because I knew sometimes with this kind of stuff, you can overanalyze it,
sure,
and it doesn't matter, because ultimately there's going to be constraints, and I knew it was going to be very limited time. It was going to be very quick.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to be in a hotel where a lot of celebrity portraits happen, and so I just decided to work with what I had and keep it simple. But try to my goal was to get one really great image, at least an image that I was really excited about and proud of. And so that's why I decided to do a studio portrait, because I mean, I like to kind of focus in on what is the point of the image, what am I trying to say. And so for me, the hotel really had nothing to do with her. I mean, she was there, but that was it. There wasn't really any interest from the location. I knew we weren't going to be able
to add anything. Why include it? That makes sense.
Right. So I just decided to focus in on her, and that's what I did. And I had some specific ideas for lighting and kind of posing, but once she got there, she was very fidgety, and she was actually noticeably nervous, and she was moving around quite a bit. And she commented that she wasn't really used to being on that side of the camera, and so I realized I wasn't going to get her to like just hold still like I wanted in this certain way. And so it very much felt like a collaboration. She was suggesting and moving around, and she wanted to pull up a table to lean on, and so I just kind of let her do what made her feel most comfortable, and she started really using her hands. And I think at one point, I have another image I haven't shown very much, but she just kind of put her head in her hands like to rub her eyes and to like kind of get herself ready. And there was this another moment where she put her hand over her face, and I asked her just to hold it just quickly because it was very striking. And that was the image that that came about that most people think of about that shoot. But yeah, it was incredible. It was like the only time I've ever been very much aware of who I was looking at through my camera. Usually it becomes lights and color and shapes and feeling of emotion, but I was aware and thinking to myself, wow, this is Annie Leibovitz, that I'm looking at through the camera. So that, I will, no matter who I photograph the rest of my life, I'll always look back and still feel some excitement and good memories about that shoot.
Well, no doubt. I mean, it's funny when you think of her career and how it's funny. I don't want to be overly nostalgic or even make things up. I just have tracked her career a little bit, and what strikes me is the way she emerged was she just immersed herself. She threw herself into every situation she could. She embeds herself with the Rolling Stones. She gets to, she happens to be with John Lennon and Yoko Ono the day that the tragedy happens, but she too was very fortuitous and kind of arriving in a moment. And it sounds like that's a lot of what your own career is. And then to create an image that iconically looks like an iris, like closing on an eye of her. I mean, it's brilliant. I'm sure she is thrilled with what you created. And but it seems like in all these things, John, what I'm most struck with is that you consistently have a long view to what you're doing, whether it be your not-for-profit work or the things you're supporting or the way you're positioning your brand or the people you're choosing and how you're setting those things up. If I'm at home and I'm watching this and I'm really interested in going, look, I do want to go all in this high-risk venture called photography in my genre of choice. And they're sitting down with coffee with you and you know what you know, but you don't have your brand or the platform that you're standing on right now. And you're starting from scratch in this era where it's not the 60s when Annie was starting. It's not even like 2007 or 8 when Twitter was just coming out. Like Twitter's it's just a different world now. Mm-hmm. How would you go about like initial steps? What would you be spending your time on in trying to launch a brand now?
That's a good question. I think we tend to overcomplicate this industry and what needs to be done. But I think at the core of what it takes to make it, it's important to be shooting a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm not the first person to say this, but it's important to be creating work. I mean, that's what we do, right? We're photographers, so you need to be creating work. And then secondly, I think marketing is I wouldn't even put one as more important than the other. I mean, I think creating and marketing are hand in hand, so important. You could create the best work in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it doesn't do you much good, really, unless you're just a hobbyist. And not just, but unless you're a hobbyist, and that's your end goal. But yeah, assuming you want to get your work in front of people and you want people to hire you, you've got to have work to show and you've got to show it. So I think that's the most important thing. It's easy to get caught up in, everyone's got, like 10 best ways to do this, 10 best ways for social media and all that stuff. And I think all of those tools and all those things are really great, but I think if you're creating good work And I use the distinction because not to sound elitist, but I mean there is really great work, and then there's work that's just kind of like mediocre.
Yeah.
And if you're creating really great work, and if you're showing it to the right people, and you're being consistent, you're going to be really successful. And you have to have a long-term view. You can't do this really great project and expect like something to happen from it right away. Like sometimes you need to get in front of people 5 times over the course of 3 or 4 years or something until it really sticks, until they recognize that consistency, until they remember your brand, who you are. And so I think really like when a lot of times when people are asking like, what do I do? How do I do it? It's like we're looking for shortcuts, and I do it too, you know.
Sure.
But there really are no shortcuts. I mean, it just takes hard work. It takes creating good work, and it takes consistency
over and over and over again. Yeah.
One example I think about often is I won't say the website, but I remember reading on a pretty popular website once that postcards were dead, or at least they should be. You know, don't send postcards anymore. Nobody likes getting postcards. They largely go straight to the trash. Nobody sees them.
Right.
And that was really discouraging for me, especially because I was very, very young, and that was like, oh my, what else do I do? You know, like that's one of the main things. And so, but I also probably because I just spent a little bit of money on a postcard, and I was like, this is not what I want to read when I just put this money in. But it was something that I was really proud of. I felt like it was really good. I had a designer put it together. And I went out and did meetings like the following month, and I think I had about 10 meetings, and 6 of the people I met with had my postcard on their wall.
No kidding.
And people put up maybe like 15 postcards at the most, it seems like, on the wall, and because, you know, space is limited. And so that really made an impact on me. It made me realize, okay, people hate getting bad postcards. People hate getting postcards that are inappropriate for what they're doing, you know, like people don't want to get a bunch of food photography if they're working at, you know, Esquire or whatever. I mean, so yeah, there's a lot of problems with like with email, e-promos, and postcards or whatever. But the problems largely are coming from people who are being unthoughtful and putting out bad work, essentially. And so I would say don't be discouraged by all this noise and things that people tell you can or can't do. You just have to be sure of yourself, and you have to be confident. And if you're doing good work, and if you just know, okay, it's gonna be a grind, I'm gonna have to get after it. That's really the best path to take. And so ultimately, again, if you look back at that, it's nothing groundbreaking. I mean, this is pretty simple advice. But I think so often we just want shortcuts, and really I think there are no shortcuts. Sometimes, you know, you hear about a photographer that just kind of gets thrown right into it and some great things happen, and that's not to say it can't happen, but you know, I've known some photographers who have just been like the flavor of the month, who have been really great, and hopefully they recognize that, and they knew this isn't going to continue. I have to really make sure that I keep up a good campaign that will get me through, you know, to the next wave. And so that's a really great way to think about it. Even if you do find yourself busier than ever, and it's like your best year ever, you better not rest and assume that the next year is going to be like that, because if you don't keep after it and maintain that strong branding and marketing, you know, you'll find yourself
eroding.
Yeah, eroding. So I don't know. I'm probably rambling at this point.
Not at all. Honestly, you're talking to a guy who wrote a book called Fast Track Photographer, which is like the worst title in the history of books. And and it's unfortunate because I just said this to another friend on a call like this, that I wish I had called it Efficient Track Photographer or something like that, where it's not about quick or shortcuts. It's actually the long view, but it could be the most efficient. And what I'm hearing you say, honestly, it's very encouraging. It's a sense of like, yeah, there's no people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, and they underestimate what they can do in 2. This kind of like drip, drip, drip. Do it again, do it again, do it again, create, create, create. And it's very compelling. It's inspiring for me just as a colleague. And I love what you said about it's not about the mailer. It's about whether the mailer is any good. And I think that's encouraging for anyone who's listening, because then whatever the medium they choose, the mandate is excellence. And if they get excellent in almost any context, they could probably find some success.
Yeah.
So
I think it's, you know, when people throw out these like statements about like this works in photography or you have to do this, I mean, it's important to identify, okay, well, what are the rules, or what are the, you know, the factors that we're basing this statement on, because so many times it's like you'll read an article from someone and maybe that article comes from their frustration of, yeah, people really do receive 100 promos a day. That's true. I'm not disputing that.
Yep.
But if there's something really good, if there's something thoughtful, they are going to keep it. And again, not everyone, but you have to show your work. And so if we listened to every single article out there, we wouldn't be sending mailers, we wouldn't be sending emails, and we wouldn't be calling people asking for meetings anymore. And so you have to kind of just fight through that and decide you're going to do better than everyone else.
Awesome. Hey, John, thank you so much for being on the show, and I'm going to bug you again. I want you back, man. And also, because we have common friends, you guys don't know this off the air, but I went to a college here in Southern California, and I had a particular professor who then moved on to Seattle Pacific, which is where John went to college, and we have that in common. And at the very least, you and I and Kenman need to go grab a bite to eat next time I'm in Seattle or something.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a small world. I'd love to see both of you. So
okay, that's great. Well, thanks again. But if you're at home and you're watching this, a couple things. Number one, follow John Keatley. It's Keatley at John Keatley on the Twitter. Thanks to Adorama for underwriting this thing and for providing this opportunity. And check out all the past episodes over at blog.fasttrackphotographer.com. So thanks again, John.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.